He has conducted hundreds of lectures while gaining national attention for his engaging style and captivating approach. He currently lives in Saskatoon with his beautiful wife and 4 kids. I understand, too, that he also has 2 dogs and something called Hank the Tank. So we'll have to ask him about that. He has spent years working as an addictions counselor, a clinical case manager, and a college instructor. His book, Stepping Out from the Shadows, A Guide to Understanding and Healing from Addictions, can be found in treatment centers, classrooms, and workplaces across Canada. It can also be found in my living room. And his writing has also been published by several national magazines. So without further delay, I am extremely thrilled to introduce to you and to shut off my mic so he can turn his on, Mr. Allan Kehler.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Good to be here. If we can just get the PowerPoint on, and I want to start by asking you a question. Are you an individual who wants to exist, or are you an individual who wants to live? And there's a very distinct difference between the two of them, correct? Because to exist is easy. It's like going through life on autopilot. Somebody who goes through the motions, I would say, but not the emotions. Because somebody who exists, do they step outside of their comfort zone? Yes or no? No. Do they take risks? No. And therefore, they don't grow. So I had an opportunity to coach the Special Olympics floor hockey team when I lived here in Edmonton. And for me, this was a group of individuals who had it right, because they viewed the world as though everybody loved them, and in turn, they loved everybody else. And it was refreshing. I took them to Calgary for a provincial tournament, and in that first game, we were getting destroyed. I mean destroyed. We were losing 27-0. And as a coach, I own none of that. You know, I put that all on them. But the game's almost over, and one of my athletes, Glenda, she's in the front row. She comes up to me and she says, "Hey, coach, are we winning?" I'm thinking, really? Really? But she's excited and she's waiting, so I said, yes. Yay! She ran all around that gym, and I thought that's how it should be. But not all of them took that loss that well. And so some of them turned to food to manage their stress. And I remember opening up one of the hotel rooms, and I had half of my team in there, and they're all eating steak and potatoes. And I said, "Guys, what are you doing?" "Oh, coach, room service, it's free." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no, that's not free. I got to pay for that." But it wasn't their problem. So I'm going to hopefully give you some alternative tools to be able to manage your stress. And that's where, to start off, we're going to have a quiz. My students at the college were just put through a quiz last week, and so now you will be in that same seat. In your package, you should have a handout. There are 10 questions. They are true and false. Don't cheat off the person beside you. Do the best you can. We're going to plow through them. Here's the first question I have for you. And be honest, you've actually prayed for someone to be sick or absent from your place of work or a family function. Show of hands, who says true? Oh, coming at you. I appreciate the honesty. Nice. I used to hand out metal water bottles. And I only did that once. Now I go with stress balls. But you know, here's the thing. I want you to think about somebody who's caused you immense stress. Maybe somebody who's always going through life angry. Keep that in mind as I tell you this one little story. Because this is my youngest son, Malcolm, and for Halloween, he was a hot dog. His 4-year-old brother, hamburger. I have 4 boys. For the 11-year-old, mustard, and for the 15-year-old at the time, ketchup. But at 15, as if, right? It's not going to happen. Now, I view adults in the same way that I do children, because children enter into this world pure and innocent. No child will enter into this world racist, correct? No child will enter into this world wanting to inflict pain upon anybody else. And so the question is, what happens? And the answer is, hurt people hurt people. At one of the treatment centers that I was working at, there was this one man. He was a bodybuilder, about 230 pounds. And he always went through the day angry. And so naturally, we kept our distance. And on the one day, I come around the corner, and he has a receiver from a payphone in his hand, and he's about to put that right through the glass. So I said, "Oh, hey now, you need to talk?" So he comes into my office, and he's mad. And for 40 minutes, he just walks and paces and swears. I said nothing. At the end of those 40 minutes, this man sits down, and do you know what the emotion was that presented itself? crying. You know, all this pain started to come out, and further conversation, I was able to understand that what drove this man's pain was that his aunt had just passed, and this is the woman who raised him, but see, he didn't know how to manage that pain. Anger is just a secondary emotion. The question is what drives that behavior. My point is this. Anger plus anger will give you what? 100% of the time. More anger. Compassion. Compassion changes everything. The next time somebody's making you so upset, my challenge to you is this. Take a step back and try to figure out what's driving that behavior. And that will put you in a much better position. Okay, second question. You will perform better under moderate levels of stress than no stress at all. Show of hands who's going with true. Yes, true, coming at you. Nice, woo! That looks more like what my Saskatchewan Rough Riders do. But yes, see, stress gets a bad rap, but is it fair to say that we need a little bit of stress to perform? That's what motivates us, that's what propels us, but when it becomes too much, then it makes our performance difficult. Okay, off to a good start. Here's the third question. Continuous stress will actually reduce your overall IQ and emotional intelligence. Show of hands, who's going with true? Yes, true? Okay, we're going to try this one that way. Yes, that's amazing. Well done, well done. Yes, it was teamwork. Yes, and have you ever felt that when you're under stress you make poor decisions or you've made a decision that you later regret? One of my friends was a principal of a small town school, and everybody knew that when that bell rang, all the sports equipment was to stay inside of that school. But on one day, there was a young boy who decided to challenge the principal's authority. And so he marched out in front of that principal with a soccer ball, and he stood in front of him, and he tossed it up and down, tauntingly. And the principal said, "Put the ball inside." And he goes, "No." So again, the principal says, "I said put the ball inside now." And again, "No." And then you know what this young boy does? He punts that ball, and it lands on the school roof. And then he runs, and he hops on his bike, and he pedals down Main Street. What does the principal do? He grabs a kid's bike, and he chases after him down Main Street, you know, knees hitting the handlebars. And then he said to me, "You know, I got to a point when I thought, well, what am I going to do when I catch him?" Right? And thankfully, he didn't catch him, or he probably wouldn't have his job. But the point being, we don't make good and healthy decisions. Okay, fourth one for you. Stress from your personal life will disappear the moment that you enter into your place of work. Who says true? False, thank you. I mean, as if. How many of you have children? Okay, and if you have children that are sick, you bring that emotion into the workplace, right? You're still renting out headspace. Often we will show up in body but not in mind. It doesn't just turn off like a faucet, but the key is this, to start to identify when we have to put on a mask and take the time to let that mask down and actually figure out what's going on inside. Question number 5. A relationship exists between trauma and substance abuse. True or false? Who says true? Well done. Coming at you at that table. Yikes. Yeah, that was, I take that. I'll take the rap for that. Yes, it's true. Now, I just want to go through what's called the autonomic nervous system, short and sweet. So the moment that there's a threat to the system, it is the sympathetic system that's activated, and it says, get ready. This is your fight, flight. If those aren't options, freeze. So you think about driving a car here to the Northlands this morning. Somebody cuts you off. What happens to your body? Does your heart rate just slow down? No! Heart rate increase, blood pressure increase, shoulders up, right? You're on guard. But then once you realize that there's no further threat, it is the parasympathetic system that kicks in and says, calm down. You're okay. And this is how a healthy autonomic nervous system will regulate itself. For individuals who go through trauma, it changes the entire way that the system responds to stress. Early in my sobriety, I started to get these memories, these horrific memories, because as you're fully aware, we store and suppress trauma in our cells. And once we have support around us, the body says, okay, I'm going to release some of this. So early in my sobriety, I started to remember being sexually abused throughout my childhood by my grandfather. And I had no idea that that stuff was even in there. But I turned to substances, self-injurious behaviors, in an effort to self-regulate. And I'm just going to guide you through this because so many people are trying to turn to substances and self-injurious behaviors just so that they can feel an element of peace. And so just using abuse for an example, as soon as that door would open, right, what happened to my system? I was on guard. It was the sympathetic system that was activated. And after the abuse would happen, nobody was there to say, it's okay, Al, take a deep breath, calm down. And so I went through life on guard. My sympathetic system was always on, go, go, go. Now, that's what can happen. People's system can get stuck on. And so they go through life ready. Alcohol. Is alcohol a central nervous system stimulant or a central nervous system depressant? Which one? Depressant. So think about this. The moment that I drink alcohol, what happened to my system? If somebody has a positive experience from something, do you think that they might use it again? Sure. And so this is where Johann Hari talks about addiction being about connection, bonding. I became bonded to something such as alcohol. Why? Because it gave me an escape. And so I continued to rely on that. And of course, then all of a sudden we find that we lose ourselves and become psychologically and physically dependent to it. And on the flip side, we can have somebody whose system gets stuck off. What does that look like? They go through life, I don't care. They isolate self. Flat affect, no emotion. And then if this individual takes a substance like a central nervous system stimulant, cocaine, amphetamine, speed, and for the first time they come to life, they feel like they can be a social butterfly. Do you think that they might use that substance again? And again, they become bonded to it. Is it a healthy way to manage stress and to self-regulate? No. Is there logic in it? Yes. But there are ways in which we can naturally help to regulate the system. One of the most important ones being something we do every day, breath. Just by taking deep breaths in, right? In through the nose, exhaling out through the mouth for 1 to 2 minutes will assist you in bringing the system back into a state of balance. Now, how many of you are quite familiar with acupressure or you have acupuncture done? I just want to show you this one acupressure point because this is a point that assists in managing pain, stress, headaches. And so if you make an L with your left hand and you put your pointer finger up at the sky, you're going to see a little groove in between your pointer finger and your thumb. Take your right thumb and just massage that V gently back and forth. And for how many of you is that pretty tight? A little bit of pain. But if you continuously do that, that pain will dissipate and that will assist you in also self-regulation and in managing some of that some of the physical symptoms. Okay, question number 6, getting back to the quiz. True or false, emotions are energy. Who says true? Okay, we're going a little farther back to that table. Oh, well done. It's pretty close. Yes, of course emotions are energy. If you have a garbage bag and if you stuff that garbage bag full of clothes and you put more and more clothes inside of that bag, what is eventually going to happen to that bag? Burst, spills out. Same thing with emotions. If we do not manage those emotions, they become pent up. And that's where we often talk about walk, talk, write. You want 3 key tools to manage stress, right? As soon as you start walking, what happens? Endorphins are naturally produced. Our voice is our greatest tool, getting that out. And writing. See, a lot of our children do not trust anyone, and for good reason. But you can tell a piece of paper anything, and you write and write and write, and when you're done, you rip it up, you burn it, you bury it. It doesn't matter. You're able to get that same release. Okay, question number 7. You will have felt guilty when you put your own needs before someone else's. Who says true? And is this a problem if it's happening all the time? How many of you have a hard time saying no? Oh, people don't respond very well to the word no, correct? Do you know who approaches me more than anyone else after presentations? It's parents. And often the dialogue will go something like this. My son, he's a good kid. He's not doing very good. And they'll proceed to talk about their son for about 20 or 30 seconds, And then I say something like, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm not so much concerned about your son as I am about you. How are you doing? And how do you think that parent typically responds emotionally? Tears. And I think to myself, when's the last time that somebody actually asked them how they're doing? See, we can be so quick to lose ourselves in the journeys of others. We become so enmeshed in our relationships that we have with our children, our spouses, our work. Guess what happens in the process? We lose out on the journey that we were meant to lead in the first place. It is saying, I respect self enough to put self first. Your family system, everything around you cannot function unless you take care of self, correct? And sometimes we have to do a little better job setting up our boundaries. And the key thing is, if we set up a boundary and they don't respond well and they don't understand it, they don't need to understand it, correct? We can communicate that. Okay, people have a shorter attention span than goldfish. Who's going with true? Yes, well done. This is a study done by Microsoft Corp. And see, they found that the attention span of a human was, of a goldfish was 9 seconds. 9 seconds. I don't know how they did this study. But humans' attention span was 7 seconds. And I have ADD and a number of other issues, so I'm running more around 2 and 3. But you know, we have a very difficult time focusing. Okay, question number 9. All that we can control in this world is self. Who says true? Yes, well done. Coming at you. Nice. Oh, that's going backwards. Yes, it's true. How many of you have tried to control someone? How did it work? No. See, if we can understand that all that we can control in this world is self, that will put us in an immediate position of power. What's the definition of anxiety? Trying to control things outside of self. And once you start to figure out, okay, all that I have control over are my own thoughts, right? My own feelings. I am in control of my own happiness. When you put your focus back on self, perspective changes. Last question. Time heals all wounds. Who says true? False. Time provides us with the opportunity to heal. If we do nothing with the time that we've been given, healing cannot take place. So when I was young, I grew up in a town, about 230 people. That last road in that town was gravel. I was going around that corner way too fast, and I knew I was going to fall. And I felt myself tipping, and my left arm hit the road, and I got gravel embedded into my arm. And then I fell into the ditch, and I was in this big heap of wreckage. And there's only 3 nurses in the town. What are the odds? The one nurse actually saw this go down. So she runs across the road, and she gets into the ditch, and she lifts me up from the wreckage, and she brings me into her home, brings me into the washroom, and then she gets out the peroxide. And then she got out the scrub brush. And then the Q-tips. I remember sitting on that toilet seat, and she poured that peroxide in, and it bubbled, and I screamed. And then, okay, are there any nurses in here? Okay, I don't know if this is medically professional, because she just grabbed that scrub brush, and she just scrubbed. And then she took the Q-tips, and she got every last bit of gravel out. But what did she do on that day? She cleaned the wound. If you have a clean wound, you cannot stop the healing process, no matter how hard you try. And it's the exact same thing with emotions. If we're willing to slow down, stop, be with self, go within, face our anger, our sadness, our shame, you cannot stop that process of healing. Is it painful to go within? Of course it is. It's easier to exist, but it's so important if we want to ever achieve living that we just slow down and do the work, and then healing will inevitably take place. All right, tally it up. See how you did. I suspect you did very well because you are an educated group. Just show of hands, how many of you are superstars in the room? Oh, well done. Anybody get them all right? Yes, okay, come on up. No, okay, I'll continue. All right. One of the challenges that we have as humans is, how do we go about approaching somebody who's hurting? If you were to walk around the corner and walk into a room and you see a woman with her head on the table crying, would you approach it differently if it were a man with his head on the table crying? And the follow-up question is, should it be different? Now, I lost my BFF, my best friend, to suicide. He was the best man at my wedding, and not more than a year later, I'm given the tribute at his funeral. I learned a lot from that experience. I learned how to grieve sober. But here's the biggest takeaway. I learned that you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. I could have dragged him to the hospital. I could not force him to stay. I could have dragged him to a counselor. I could not force him to speak. Right? There's only so much that we can do. So what I've learned is if I have my sons, if I have a friend, a coworker, and if they're struggling, and I'm so uncomfortable that I say nothing, and then I play that tape forward and I find out in a day, a month, even a year, that they harmed themselves or took their life, am I going to sit there thinking, man, I should have done something? And if the answer to that is yes, then we need to act. My goal is, when I put my head on the pillow at the end of the day, to know that I have said and done everything so that I do not have to look back thinking, should have done more. When we approach people, talk about self-harm, for example. You know, unfortunately, there's so many individuals who are in so much pain that they turn to cutting, burning, poisoning. And it's not that we have to approach them and say, man, looks like you've been cutting again. But see, if you just approach someone who's in pain, and if you say something like, I don't mean to pry, I just want to let you know I'm concerned. Just want to let you know I'd be more than happy to listen if you ever needed to talk. We have two basic needs. One, see me. Two, hear me. You put a statement like this out there, you just said, I see you, and you have now given them an opportunity to be heard. Whether or not they act on that invite is completely out of your control. But see, you have shown them, because even with self-injurious behaviors, they are saying, look at me. Something is going on in my life that is so painful that I cannot put words to it. And see, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? There's immense power in that. Because for me, when I was in high school, that's when my mental health issues started to surface. The signs were all there. I deviate from leadership groups. I slow down with the athletics, right? My academics are sliding, changing peer groups, but yet not one teacher approached me. What's the message that we get when we're in pain and nobody approaches us? Nobody cares. See, I know that they cared, but they didn't know what to do with me. And it was years later at the U of A, in a class of more than 300, and it was a professor by the name of Ian McNeil. And he came up to me and he said, come to my office, Al, let's talk. I had no idea why. I take a risk. I go up to the third floor. His door's wide open. I walk in. He says, have a seat. And then he says to me, how are you doing today, Allan? Think about our automatic questions that we ask in the morning, first thing when we walk by someone. How are you doing? Good. Fine. Right? It's interesting how the question changes if you add the person's name and if you use the word today. And then what Ian did is he created a space where there was compassion, and he put it on me, and then he waited. 7% of all of our communication is verbal. I could tell by everything that he was a compassionate man who was just willing to listen, no judgment. That was one of the first times in my life that I removed the mask and I actually talked about what was going on. In 10 minutes, Ian McNeil changed my entire life because he saw someone who is in pain and he took the time to listen. He did not fix me. He gave me resources. I started to write all my exams in rooms by myself. That was very difficult for ego. I got note takers. I got tutors. But see, I learned that if I wanted to succeed, I had to start asking for what I needed. And so even if somebody doesn't act on this invite, we can just continuously check in, because if they're not ready, they're not ready. Right? We already went over this. All that we can control is self. What happens is sometimes after I've given out this invite, right, let's talk, a student, a client, or somebody will fly into my office and they'll say something like, you cannot possibly understand what I've gone through. And if we respond with, oh, yes, I can. I went through substance abuse issues. I went through mental health, whatever it is. No. If we respond with these four powerful words, help me to understand. Watch what happens. Where does the energy shift? Where does the focus go? Back on them. And as soon as they start to talk, healing. Can darkness survive in light? Yes or no? That is the formula. The more that they get the darkness out, guess what will naturally happen? They will make more room for light. Some people are ready. Some people are not ready for change. What is this? This is ambivalence, right? Well, I could do something. Now, is it fair to say that we cannot change anyone? Sure. But we can empower someone towards change. And the way in which I will do that is through one simple question. I'll ask you the question. It is a yes-no response. Don't think about it. Give an automatic reaction. And the question is, are you happy? Yes or no? I mean genuinely happy. Now, for the majority of my clients, the answer is no, otherwise I wouldn't be meeting with them, right? But the fact is, if you want something different, you have to do something different. If you are not happy, something has to give. Something has to change, right? Because if you change nothing, you know what the future will look like. It's quite predictable. Who has power? Self. So if you want something different, it means that you're going to have to take a risk. And do you think that you might fall? Of course you'll fall. But see, I would say 5% of all of our growth comes from our successes. 95% of all of our growth comes from what? Failures. And why do we call it failures? Just chalk it up to expectation, or expectations. That's how we grow. I mean, not expectations, experiences, right? They're not failures, they're experiences. So, every time that you have a challenge in front of you, you only have two choices. One, you can go around the problem. And if you go around the problem, do you think that it might come back to you? Yes, this is the boomerang effect. This is where people say, oh, why does this keep happening to me over and over? Maybe it's because you didn't do anything proactive, because the shortest way through is always the middle. And so that's my son Brody, and every time that he fell, right, he would just say, Dad, when I fall, I get back up. I mean, every time that we fall or stumble in life, it does provide us with another opportunity to stand up. And so I was going to read an excerpt, but for the sake of time, I had a student named Gloria. And Gloria, she went through university time and time again. I mean, we're talking 15 times she was enrolled in university. And she was in her 50s when she finally came into my class. And she was trying to achieve some kind of academic success. And I think she was 52 when she finally marched across that stage and received her diploma. But I mean, you talk about a woman who was resilient, and actually when I asked her whether or not I could use that story in my book, I explained that I would keep it confidential, I wouldn't use her name. And the beautiful thing is, after only 20 minutes of talking, she said, you know what, Al, I'm tired of hiding. Can you please use my name? Put Gloria in there. I mean, and that's what it's all about, right? Why are we ashamed of our failures or of our experiences? This is something that is to be admired. Because, again, we were born to fight. If somebody puts your head underwater, what are you going to naturally do? You will fight. Exactly. So one of the activities that I will use with my clients or even with my students is I want them to draw a timeline. And this in itself is the difference between existing and living, right? If you think that you can go through life linear, it's not what it looks like. It is all about the highs and the lows. And if you were to actually map out what your life looked like, charting down all the highs and all the lows, it would be interesting to see what it looked like. But I can't tell you how many times youth will come up to me and say, Al, I'm done. I'm ready to check out. And this activity is about perspective. If you map out all the highs and lows in your life, it would be interesting to see all of the things that you've gone through. Maybe at the age of 4, you lost a friend in an impaired driving accident. That was difficult. rose above. Maybe at the age of 8, parents got divorced. Challenging. But see, after you've done an activity like this, I'll sit there with that child and say, do not tell me that you are not a fighter. You got through all these challenging times, right? This is perspective. If they think that they are a fighter, will they fight? Of course. Thoughts lead to feelings, lead to actions. And the follow-up question is, let's look at some of those supports, some of those resources. What did you do in those times of challenge so that you could rise above? Did you journal? Did you turn to music? And can we somehow use some of those resources today to get out of what you're struggling with currently? Make sense? Now, this is always the last and final question that I ask my students on their final exams. I say, who's number 1? And more than half will say, you are, Al. And I say, yeah, you know it. Check mark, bonus mark. No. Who's number 1? Self. Exactly. So what you have on this handout is all about the balance wheel. It's based on the medicine wheel. I teach at an Indigenous college in Saskatoon, and I want to just place the focus back onto yourself. So please take a look at this handout, and we are going to map out where you currently are in terms of balance in these 4 domains. So you're going to see 4 different areas at the top of the handout. You have physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. So we're going to put a numeric value, 1 being low, 10 being high. Starting off with physical. What does it look like if you're in complete balance physically? Well, it probably means that you're eating a healthy diet. It probably means that you're drinking lots of water, limiting caffeine intake, engaging in a lot of physical activity. So 10 being in complete balance, 1 being very low, please assign a number value for where you're at right now. And again, don't cheat. Don't look at the person beside you. This is about you. Moving on, mental. What does it look like if somebody's in complete balance mentally? Well, that probably means that they're able to have positive self-talk. They're able to focus on what's going right opposed to what's going wrong. They see themselves as a fighter, as being resilient. They're proud of the choices that they make. They can problem solve. So again, give yourself a numeric value, 10 being high, 1 being low. Next, we have spiritual, and that's not to be confused by religion. Religion can be a stepping stone towards spirituality. So somebody who's in balance spiritually, what does that look like? They're probably able to take a lot of their pain and transfer it to a higher power. Perhaps they engage in meditation, yoga. They have a relationship with self. They have compassion, love. They do unto others as they would want done unto self. Perhaps they go to the church, synagogue, sweats, whatever it looks like. And lastly, we have emotional. Somebody who's in balance emotionally, they are able to be with their pain. They don't have to run from their pain. They can go to support groups. They can let go. They can forgive. So assign a number value to all those 4 areas, and then we're going to plot it out. And you see an example on the left. And so on the right, plot those out, and 0 will be in the middle. So for example, this individual scored 4 out of 10 on mental. 1, 2, 3, 4. On physical, they scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Count from the inside out, and that will give you the perfect wheel, I'm sure. So while you're doing that, does somebody want to share which area you scored the lowest in? Yeah, go ahead. Physical, show hands if physical was the one area that you scored the lowest in. Anyone want to share which area you scored the highest in? Mental? Who scored highest in mental? How about spiritual was the highest? Okay. Now, if you're not happy with the way that your wheel looks like, guess who's the only one who's in a position of power and control to do something different? Self. And so if you have a 4 out of 10 for physical, the goal isn't how can I get to a 10? The goal is what would I have to do to get that 4 to a 5? And how then would my life be different? And then you focus on another area and another, and eventually you can start to lead a life of balance. Because as you know, if even one of these 4 areas is out of balance, we essentially are out of balance. So think about if there's one that you want to change and what you're going to specifically do to increase that number by 1. Okay, thanks for doing that one. Now, my challenge for you, we have about 10 minutes left, is in the next, let's say today's Saturday, by Friday, I want you to do one thing just for you, to set up the time and the space just for you. Maybe that means curling up with a good book. Maybe that means going to a movie theater with a bag of popcorn. Maybe doing some yoga. I play dodgeball. Every Monday night, I play dodgeball in Saskatoon, and it's crazy because in my mind, I think I'm so fast. I think I have like this 40-inch vertical, but the ball will come and it's more, I'm hardly off the ground. And actually, this just happened where the ball was coming at my right leg, and I said, Al, lift your right leg. And then the ball hit me, and about 2 seconds later, my right leg went up. What? Like my neurons just aren't firing. Anyway, do something just for you. Why? Because you deserve it. Now, my whole mantra is that talking facilitates healing. Even the reason I put J.A. on my throat, Justin Andres, my best friend who acted on suicide, it is a reminder to talk about suicide, mental health, substance abuse, living, right? Talking about pain. And when I say surround yourself by others who speak your language, what I mean is whatever you're currently going through in terms of a personal challenge, I guarantee you there are others who are going through a similar experience. See, I don't go to a 12-step program like Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, to work the program as much as I do to be around people who get me. See, one of the biggest challenges of my life was when I finally entered into the Saskatoon Sexual Assault Center with other men who'd been sexually abused. That was shameful, right? To walk through those doors, to know that I'd have to confront some of this. And I remember at that first meeting, there was one other person there, one man. And when I started to share a little bit about my pain, I couldn't. I stopped. I shut down. I was done. And this man looks at me and he says, "It's okay, Al. I get it." That saved my life. There is nowhere else in this world that I could have gone to receive that gift. It took a lot of courage to get me into that situation, into that environment. But in turn, I received an incredible reward. And that's my point. For there to be a payoff, often we have to allow ourselves to become vulnerable, to take a risk. But then guess what? We are the ones who are rewarded. And like anything, the more that we talk about it, the more that we return, the freer we become. We benefit from it. And I remember very clearly when I was meeting with an elder and he said to me, "Al, you are not the only one who's been sexually abused. You are not the only one who's gone through mental health issues. You are not the only one who's struggled with an addiction. If you want something different, go get it. The world owes you nothing." And I was mad. I was so mad. But is there truth in that? Of course there is. But see, I wore the V on my forehead for years. Woe is me, I'm the victim. And yet when we open up our eyes, we see nothing but resources. We have counselors. We have social workers. We have audio books. Information is at our fingertips. We have natural alternatives, right? It is everywhere. But for years I said, nah, it's too difficult or nobody would understand. So again, if we want something different, we have to do something different. This is what I have today. I have a wife. I have 4 boys. I have a home, not a house. Edmonton is a difficult place for me to return to. I spent 7 years here, and I was 8 years ago, I was the bachelor living on my own here, struggling with mental health issues, addictions, and I mean, as if I thought that any of what I have today was possible. And it took a lot of different variables. It took the timing of myself to be ready. It took a lot of support from other people, right? It's push and pull. But my point is, nothing is rigid. What's happening with a lot of our children, a lot of our youth, is they feel hopeless. In Saskatchewan especially, there's all these suicides, right? We just lost another 10-year-old girl. There's a lack of hope. What we need to understand is that when it is so dark, we literally have to bring ourselves out from the dark into the light so we can be exposed to light. People have to understand, especially children, that nothing is permanent. Right? This too shall pass. Soon you will come to a time when you will get your power back. You can leave that toxic family system or whatever it is, right? Because for a lot of people who come from a toxic home, you live by the 3 rules. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. But the crazy thing is you need those rules to survive in the system. Because if you go against those rules, there are consequences. But then you can start to rewrite your own rules. And our kids need to start feeling safe enough to feel. And interestingly enough, my oldest son, he came home, and I walked in kind of at the same time, and he said, "How's your day?" I said, "Good." But nothing on my body was saying good. You know, why would my kid talk about their personal experience, their pain, if I can't even express that I had a frustrating day? And we don't ever have to get into details, but the point is, right, we got to walk the walk. So my wish for you is simply this, that you will continuously be challenged but never defeated. And if you go by this principle, you will always be going through life living, not existing. So if you're going to creep on me anyway, Facebook is a site that I have out from the shadows. I just post a few things there, or Twitter's at Allan Kehler. And if I can be of assistance for you, or if you're looking for some handouts or additional information, the website's up there. And to Wendy and to the committee and April and Aaron, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for sticking around after a long day. And again, I wish you an incredible journey. Hi.